The woman in the Armani suit walked directly to the lake's edge as if she owned the place, which, as it would turn out, she was about to. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying authority that made Karen's megaphone seem like a child's toy. "Are you the HOA representative?" Karen, still standing in the lake like a power-suited scarecrow, turned with irritation. "I'm Karen Whitmore, HOA president, and you're interrupting official community business. This is a private neighborhood." The woman smiled, extending a business card that stayed mysteriously dry despite the distance. "Victoria Sterling, Sterling Development Group. I understand you're having some management issues with this water feature." Karen's eyes narrowed as she read the card. Real estate development. Her power-hungry heart began to race with possibilities. "What kind of management?" "The profitable kind," Victoria replied smoothly. "I've been watching your community for months. Prime lakefront property, growing suburban area, and apparently an HOA president with vision." The gathered residents exchanged worried glances. Bob Martinez stepped forward. "Now hold on a minute. Mr. Martinez, isn't it?" Victoria consulted her tablet without missing a beat. "Retired postal worker. Boat registration expired last month. 3 noise complaints filed against your grandchildren's pool parties." Bob's face went pale. "How do you?" "I do my homework." Victoria's attention returned to Karen, who was wading toward shore with newfound purpose. "Mrs. Whitmore, what if I told you there was a way to truly control this lake situation permanently?" Karen's soggy heels squelched on the shore. "I'm listening." "The lake isn't actually part of your HOA's property. It's owned by the county, but they've been looking to sell. Budget cuts, you understand." Victoria's smile grew wider. For the right buyer, with the right vision, it could become something transformative. Transformative how? Karen was practically salivating. Luxury resort, exclusive access, premium amenities. Victoria gestured grandly at the peaceful lake where families had been recreating for generations. "Think about it. Instead of managing complaints, you could be managing profits." The crowd erupted in protests, but Karen was already mentally counting revenue streams. "How much are we talking about?" "For the lake, 2.7 million. For the development rights and construction." "Well, that's where partnerships come in handy." Dave Whitmore finally found his voice from the deck. "Karen, we don't have that kind of money." Victoria laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a tornado. "Who said anything about your money, Mr. Whitmore?" "Mrs. Whitmore clearly has the vision and community standing to be our local partner. We provide the capital, she provides the local expertise, and shall we say, regulatory cooperation." Karen's mind was racing. All those years of being dismissed as the annoying HOA lady, all those eye rolls when she enforced the rules that kept their community pristine. Finally, someone who understood her value. "What would my role be?" she asked, trying to sound casual while internally screaming with excitement. "Community Relations Director. 6-figure salary, plus profit sharing. You'd be the face of the resort, managing the transition, handling any local resistance." Karen glanced at her neighbors' horrified faces and felt a surge of vindictive pleasure. They'd never appreciated her dedication to community standards. Maybe it was time they learned what real change looked like. "I'll need to see the contracts," she said, attempting to maintain some semblance of negotiation while already planning her resignation letter from her boring accounting job. "Of course. But Mrs. Whitmore," Victoria leaned closer, "opportunities like this don't wait. The county meeting is tomorrow night. If someone else expresses interest." The hook was set, the line was taut, and Karen Whitmore was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Karen Whitmore stood waist-deep in Pine Lake at 6:47 am, wearing her best power suit and wielding a megaphone like a weapon of mass destruction. The HOA president had finally snapped, and half the Willowbrook subdivision was gathering on their back decks to witness the spectacle. "Attention res identities." Her voice echoed across the water, causing a family of ducks to scatter in panic. "This lake is now under all freestyle HOA jurisdiction. No more UNAUTHORIZed swimming, fishing, or woiter activities without proper permits. From his lakefront deck, retiree Bob Martinez nearly choked on his coffee. Karen, you can't regulate a natural lake. Karen spun around, her perfectly styled blonde bob somehow still pristine, despite her aquatic protest. Article 7, Section 4 of our updated community guidelines clearly states that any water feature affecting property values falls under HOA management. That's for fountains and pools, shouted Lisa Chen from her kayak, paddle frozen mid-stroke. This is a 40-acre lake that's been here for centuries, and now it needs proper management. Karen waded deeper, her blazer floating around her like a designer life jacket. I've documented 17 violations this month alone. Unauthorized barbecues on the shore, children making excessive noise while swimming, and don't get me started on the fishing tournaments that attract outsiders to our community. The crowd was growing. Karen's own husband, Dave, appeared on their deck in his bathrobe, looking like a man contemplating witness protection. Honey, he called weakly, maybe we should discuss this over breakfast. Karen ignored him, her attention fixed on teenage Jake Peterson, who had the audacity to continue fishing from his family stock. Young man, do you have a permit for that recreational activity? Jake's mouth fell open. It's a lake, Mrs. Whitmore. My family's lived here for 15 years. 15 years of flagrant disregard for proper procedures. Karen declared, stumbling slightly as her heels sank into the lake bottom. Effective immediately, all lake access requires a $50 permit fee, renewable monthly. The gasps from the crowd were audible. Retired teacher Mrs. Henderson leaned over her railing. Karen, dear, you've lost your mind. We bought these homes specifically for the lake access. Then you should have read the fine print. Karen shot back, though her voice wavered slightly. The truth was, there was no fine print. The HOA had no legal authority over the lake, and Karen knew it. But she'd spent 3 sleepless nights researching property law after the Hendersons' grandson had the nerve to learn wakeboarding right outside her home office window. This is insane, muttered contractor Jim Walsh, whose pontoon boat was moored 20 feet away. What's next, Karen? Charging us for breathing the air? Karen's eyes lit up with dangerous inspiration. The air quality regulations are still under review, but noise ordinances are already in effect. Quiet hours on the lake are now 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. That's 12 hours. Bob protested. 12 peaceful hours. Karen corrected, raising her megaphone triumphantly. What she didn't notice was the sleek black sedan pulling into the community's guest parking area, or the impeccably dressed woman stepping out with a briefcase and a smile that could cut glass. 6 months later, Karen stood in the exact same spot by the lake, but everything had changed. The pristine water was now churned with construction mud. Massive machinery dominated the shoreline, and a chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded what used to be her neighbor's peaceful retreat. The Sterling Lake Resort and Spa sign gleamed mockingly in the morning sun, and Karen's brand-new BMW sat in the executive parking space she demanded. She should have been triumphant. Instead, she felt like she was drowning on dry land. Mrs. Whitmore? The voice belonged to Jake Peterson, the teenager she'd yelled at for fishing. Except now, he was 20-something, wearing a lawyer's suit and holding a thick folder of documents. Jake? Karen barely recognized him. What are you doing here? Representing the Willowbrook Residents Coalition in their lawsuit against Sterling Development. His smile was professional but cold. Turns out you can't just buy a public lake and fence it off. Who knew? Karen's stomach dropped. That's impossible. Victoria essayed. Victoria Sterling doesn't exist. Jake interrupted. The woman you made a deal with was Sarah Chen, Lisa's sister-in-law. Environmental lawyer specializing in corporate fraud. Graduated top of her class from Yale. The world tilted sideways. No, she paid me. I have the contracts. I'm the community relations director. Jake opened his folder, revealing photographs and bank records. You're the fall guy, Karen. The county never authorized the sale because the lake is protected wetland. Sterling Development is a shell company that dissolved 3 months ago. right after they cleaned out the construction accounts. And your salary? It's been coming from the community improvement fees you convinced the HOA to implement. Karen sank onto a stack of abandoned concrete pipes, her designer heels slipping on the mud. But the resort, the construction, illegal. All of it. The state environmental agency is shutting it down. And guess whose name is on all the permits as the local facilitating authority? The sound of approaching sirens cut through the construction noise. Karen watched in horror as federal agents emerged from unmarked vehicles, their badges glinting in the sunlight. Karen Whitmore? The lead agent consulted his warrant. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit environmental fraud, embezzlement of community funds, and violation of federal wetland protection laws. As they read her rights, Karen's mind raced back to that morning in the lake, megaphone in hand, absolutely certain she was in control. The worst part wasn't the handcuffs or the perp walk past her former neighbor's judgmental stares. It was seeing Bob Martinez back in his boat, peacefully fishing in the one section of lake the construction hadn't reached yet, giving her a little wave as the police car drove away. From her lawyer's office 3 hours later, Karen stared at the legal documents that would define her next decade. House in foreclosure, savings depleted by legal fees, and facing federal charges that could mean serious prison time. But buried in the police report was one detail that haunted her more than the rest. Sarah Chen's real business card, the one found in the Sterling Development Office. It didn't list her as an environmental lawyer. It listed her as a documentary filmmaker. And according to the production notes seized as evidence, the HOA Karen, a study in suburban power corruption, was already being pitched to streaming services, with Karen's own security camera footage providing most of the content. Somewhere out there, Karen realized, cameras had been rolling the entire time. Her greatest moment of perceived power had been nothing but performance art, and she'd been the only one who didn't know she was the star. The question that would keep her awake for years wasn't whether she'd go to prison, but how long until the documentary aired, and whether the world would see her as the villain or just another cautionary tale about what happens when small power meets large ambition. Either way, Karen Whitmore would never look at a lake the same way again.